take this off. I am officially recording. All right. Man, where do I begin with having Garret on this call? First of all, Garret, look, I have to say I am so pleased and excited to have you on this call, as I am sure. I mean, obviously, with the attendance here, it looks like you're quite a popular figure. I wanted to do this for a couple reasons. Number one, you have a very unique approach to this paradigm that I think, number one, you eloquently write about. And number two, there seems to be a lot of confusion around some of the things you say. Now, maybe the way they see it or perceive it or the way that it's come across to them. So I wanted to set the record straight with this call, at least, if that's okay with you. And so I wanted to start off with the first question. I'm guessing if you're on this call, you know who Garret Kramer is. And if you don't, you can go to his website. You can check him out. He's a gifted writer, a sports, what would you say? Works with psychology of sports, written several books, Still Power, Path of Least, is it No Resistance? Mm-hmm. Path of No Resistance. I'm trying to get it from the top of my mind right now. Mm-hmm. Both which are incredible books. And he's just an all around amazing guy outside of the stuff that we talk about. But we got into a talk before we got on the Zoom call to kind of see what route to take. And I had a question. You actually responded so eloquently. And I want to revisit that question, which is, you don't typically talk about mind, consciousness, and thought in the way that the people do in the principles. Thought doesn't seem to be the forefront of your mind. And from what I'm seeing, there's something bigger at play that I believe you are pointing to that we may be missing when we simply talk about thought the way we do in the principle community. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that true? Is that what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Or what are your thoughts as far as what's happening in our community and what you think we should be pointing to?
Well, sorry, let me go back to the gallery view here. So, Amir, it's not a matter of what a community or you or anyone on this call should or should not be doing. I'm only presenting in my work, in the articles that you read or in the talks that I give and the posts that I put out there, I'm only presenting what my experience is telling me. That's all any of us can ever put forth. And by what my experience is telling me, I don't mean the experience of my body and mind. I don't mean that. My body and mind are experienced. They don't do experiencing, if that makes any sense. We can circle back to that. What I'm talking about is the experience, a felt experience, a moving experience, an overwhelming moment of insight. Because there only is one insight. Now, we can personalize an insight. We can personalize insight. We can personalize revelation. We can spin it, and we have to spin it when we describe it into our own words. We have to do that. There's no other way to explain it. But in actual fact, there's only one insight, and that is we are not separate. We are one. We are love. We are consciousness. We are God. We are one being. You can say it in a few different ways. And if I look at the work of Sid Banks, which so many of us respect, that was what Sid was saying. And if you look at his early work, I think it's very reflective of that one truth, that we cannot be separate. We are one. And several years ago, this hit me kind of like a ton of bricks, and it was almost like, where have I been? Because that's the foundation in my mind, and in my experience was telling me that was the foundation. That's where we needed to start. And very privately in my work, you wouldn't see me writing about this, you didn't see me talking about this, but privately in my work, and those on this call who work close with me, they know what I'm talking about. That is the direction that I started. I start with, who am I? What am I? And everything springs from there. So I in my mind, again, that was Sid's revelation. It has to be. He just spoke from such love and understanding. It couldn't have been anything else. He had a previously non-existent desire to share. Well, that would make sense. When we wake up to the fact that we share a being, then our natural impulse is to share. So he went from a very reserved, quiet guy living his own life to someone who was sharing. That was his entire mission, to share. Now, if you look at where Sid's work, and again, this is all my experience. Don't take this as this is right or wrong. You have to go where your experience takes you. Everyone on this call, you have to look at it from a felt experience that you have or don't have. But if we go with it for a second, what I'm suggesting, well, let's look at it this way. Let's look at it first the way it looks to me that the principles, that teachers of the principles, some awesome people who I learned a lot from. It seems to me, in looking at their work, what they're saying, and you can correct, anybody can disagree or correct me if they think I'm wrong. It seems like they're saying that we are nearly 8 billion separate entities. And because of the power of thought, we see the world, one world, in 8 billion different ways, separate realities. That seems to be the inference. Whereas what I am suggesting is the same middleman, thought, but we are one being, and thought veils this one being, creating the appearance of 8 billion worlds. So it seems to me that we could either start from separation, we are separate entities, individuals, the personal, or we could start, or we can consider that maybe this order is wrong. Maybe it's one being, thought brings the personal to life, separates, causes the appearance of separation, the appearance of duality. And that is why we see different worlds. It's not one world. We're actually seeing, it's no world, actually. We're seeing from our own perception, our own experience, 8 billion different worlds. So that is the fundamental difference. And Amir, it's something I have to be honest, and again, some of you on this call know this. This is something that has perplexed me for years. There was something always not quite right about telling someone, even though I did it and wrote about it, that that circumstance cannot cause you to feel something. If the circumstance existed in actuality, I don't know how we can tell people that. But if the circumstance cannot exist separate from us, outside of our own experience, outside of consciousness, then it seems to make a lot more sense. The situation doesn't exist without us. And I will be, in my mind, at least it looks this way to me. I've been doing this work for a long time, and it's been great, but the last 5 years have been super special. I'm not saying that we've achieved any greater results or any more championships or any more of my clients doing really cool things. That's not what I'm suggesting. And even if it was, I wouldn't even know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I just know that the work has taken a turn towards bringing bringing it's not even fair to say it, but bringing communities together, because they're showing them they're not even apart. Showing them that they're not even apart. I hope that answers the question, but I'm not sure that it does.
It did. And you actually answered it very eloquently. My question to you, and I'm going to open it up after this last question to anybody that has any thoughts, is one of the reasons that the principles and mind, consciousness, and thought, and the way that it was broken down to three was useful for me, because for many years, the idea that you're telling us is very non-dual and it's very spiritual. And I got mucked up in it. Like, I get the whole, we're one with the universe. We are not only just, the circumstances cannot cause your distress, because that circumstance wouldn't exist without you creating that circumstance in the first place. But that never did anything for me. Like, something about the principles woke me up to go, whoa, it really is not my circumstances. Now, why I'm saying this to you, and this is where I think there is a little bit of a disconnect, is when someone hears that from you, Garret, in practical sense, where can they take it? How would that make actual sense with their fight with their wife, their stress at their job that they think is happening? Or am I seeing it the wrong way? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, you're not. Well, remind me of the thing about the fight with your wife, practical, because I want to address the first part first.
So let's say that
I got it. No, I got it.
Okay, got it. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Not doing anything for you. That first part. So. Okay, so let's go back to Sid again. I'm surprised that I'm doing this, to be frank, but let me give you a little bit of a thought on Sid's style of teaching, if I could. Again, my experience. If as most of you would know, Sid had his change of heart at a time, and he spoke about this almost humorously, when awareness groups were a big thing. Spiritual awakening was a thing. You had rock operas like Hair and Godspell and Jesus Christ Superstar. You had people expressing themselves in a way. It was a newfound awareness, consciousness. It was love and peace, not war. But the world at the time, before this, so a lot of the spiritual teachings that were kind of in the background started, spirit and love and peace, as I said, started to come to the foreground. And this is when Sid had his revelation. His wife used to drag him to these awareness groups. He would talk about that. But the world at that time only was very regimented. It was very structured. Schooling was structured. Family life was structured. The military was very structured. Everything was structured, not just in America or in the UK. This is pretty much across the civilized world. This is how we lived. And we didn't live because we were either very young or not alive. But this is how they lived. And at that time, the great spiritual teachers, in my mind, including Sid Banks, made a concession to that fact. So they were meeting people where they were, where their understanding was, where their life was. And as a result of that, they made concessions to absolute truth. So Sid would say things like, forgive, learn to forgive, which was a massive concession, because when Sid knew that when you woke up to who you truly were, forgiveness is who you truly are. It is your true nature. But he was making a concession about being positive and all the things he would say that sometimes confuse us today. And this is how I see it, based on the fact that that is the world he was teaching. He was making a concession to their understanding. And he wasn't the only spiritual teacher that did that. Rahana Maharshi, Krishnamurti, great non-dual teachers did it too, through meditation and practice and discipline. That was their way. That wasn't Sid's way, but that was their way. Okay? Now, in my mind, you guys, we don't need that anymore. We live in a different era. We live in a different culture. We live in a time where the world is ready to go right for it, right for how this works, without pandering to people's misunderstanding as much. I'm not saying concessions would be off the table, and I can explain what that would look like if you'd like, but I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But by and large, in my mind, the direct path, how we work, what's truly happening, the world is ready for it. We're ready for it. We don't need meditation. We don't need, and I'm not saying meditation's bad. As a way to placate the separate self, we don't need it. That's what I'm saying. That's the first part. The second part, and it goes into the first, it stems from the first part of it. Part of that is we don't need to make this practical. If you're coming to the fact that human beings are not separate, that we are one being, and you're going to try to use that in a practical way, you are spinning your wheels. We are one being. Now, how are we going to get to a personal fix? By looking at the fact that we are one being. There is no person to fix. There is no cause and effect. There is nothing personal. So we can't make it, how do I fix a fight with my wife, my spouse, whatever? How do I become a better parent? No, we need to push that normal desire to the side, as I see it, and we need to take it back to the understanding. So my message is constantly look to understand, not to cure, not to fix, not to cope, not to solve this problem, that. Simply understand. Simply understand. And when clients or groups or teams, organizations I'm working with, when they feel the normal impulse and express it to solve this problem and that, there's a constant point right back to, hang on, I hear you, but let's get back to understanding. Let's get back to looking at who we are. Who we are. All answers, Amir, spring from who we are. So my job is not to solve practical problems, if that makes any sense.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you. That was brilliant. We have Catherine has her hand raised. Let's unmute her.
I like that, Garret.
Hey, Catherine.
So, hi. So my question would be, I find you confusing. And I'm willing to try and see through that. My question would be, I'm hearing what you're saying, what you just said, and I like it. What then would make it logical for you to then ask people to do or not do something? I'm just going right to the elephant in the room. Having heard what you just said,
Right. So,
why would you send me a message or anyone else a message saying, please don't do this or that?
well, you're, as far as anyone else a message, I would stick to your
Me. Okay, sorry.
I would
You
stick
know.
to your experience. So in an attempt, as I said before, concessions are not off the table. So in an attempt to coach or teach or point, and I'm answering the question. So if I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but if you go back to what you're referring to as I answer the question, it's going to be difficult for you to understand. So if you look just at the answer, it'll be easier, in my opinion. Okay, that's how what I would say. So in an attempt to, as I said, coach, teach, point, there are times when a teacher will make a concession to what I just said. And if, for example, and I've used this example before, some of you may have heard it. When Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, he was telling people what to do. But there was not a chance that Jesus thought there were actually others. He knew there was no others. But he was making a concession to the separate self that thought it had the ability to do unto others. So he was speaking to the mistruth in order to spin the person to the fact that we are one. That's an example. It's a good example. I think it's a good example. But and obviously Jesus knew that we weren't separate, so he knew there was no others. But he made a concession to that fact in an attempt to appeal to the misunderstanding of the ego. The separate self, the ego, cannot do nothing. It is by definition an activity, not an entity. So it must do something. It cannot sit still. It cannot do nothing. It will do something. It has to do something. And a teacher knows that and will appeal to that and spin that back to who we truly are. So that's the answer to your question. The other answer, quite frankly, could be that the teacher, including me, can forget who we are and make a mistake. That's an answer too. That's a very important answer that we all need to understand, that even the most sagacious human beings forget who we truly are. And from that place, we tend to trip. We make a mistake. That's why communities like this are so important, because when that happens, we can support and bring each other back and understand that we're all susceptible to missing that.
Thank you, Catherine, and thanks,
Thanks, Catherine.
Garret.
Thanks.
We have Diane has a question. We'll unmute her.
Thanks. Hi, Garret. Hi, everybody. I'm not sure if this is relevant to this discussion, but it's a question that I've been pondering for a long time, and I can't wrap my head around it. I'm not sure how to word it even, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I understand this concept of being one with everything. And what I can't wrap my head around is when someone tells me the I, me, doesn't exist. And I've been listening to Sid, and what he says is the form and the formless are not separate, they are one. Mm. And I am form. I've taken this form, whether I'm thin or fat is irrelevant, but I have this form, and as far as I'm concerned, I exist. So when you're talking about this entity, or because I am an entity, I'm not an activity, or maybe I'm an activity actually. Yeah, okay, maybe something's going through. How the hell don't I exist? As far as I'm concerned, I'm talking to you.
Okay, well, you said a bunch in there, so let's try to get it all in. Okay, let's go back to Sid's comment. There's a lot of juice in that comment. Form and the formless are one. There's no concession in that statement. Go back to what I was saying with Catherine. There's no, that is going right to the ultimate. So an analogy that Sid used, a lot of teachers use is, and I think I even talked to you about this, maybe on a webinar or just in private. You'll remind me if I did or didn't. But an analogy often used in this work is the analogy of a screen. It could be a movie screen, a computer screen, whatever kind of screen. And if we look at the screen as consciousness, as awareness, as God. The religious word would be God. Okay, and we describe consciousness, the screen, as infinite, as eternal, as what never changes, what never comes and goes, what's permanent. That is you, that is me. That is who we truly are. Now, on the screen of consciousness, of God, of awareness, the images come and go. Life comes and goes. The screen is what's permanent. Now, in that description, human beings often find comfort, because they see that their life is playing out in consciousness as it will on the screen. And we can't jump on the screen from the audience or from our desks or whatever and change the course of events. They're going to play out as they will. And we have no say of how they play out as they will. Now, the characters on the screen, they think that they have a say. And that's what you were describing about yourself before. We forget that we're actually on the screen, and we forget. So we think we're a character, and we think we're actually have something to do with all this stuff that's happening in the movie or on the show or whatever you want to say. So, but it's just images, and I'm going to get back to the form and formless. Yeah. So what Sid is suggesting, he's taking this understanding to a whole nother level, though. He's saying that's just a step on the way to understanding who we truly are, because who we truly are is we are the screen. We are what's playing out on the screen. It's all one. That's what Sid's saying. So he's on it. So on the way to what Sid would call non-duality, he's actually, just like I just did, we're suggesting duality. The screen and the images on it are separate. But now Sid takes it a step to pure truth and says, it's all one, Diane. It's all one. So that's the ultimate spiritual truth right there. And that's what Sid was pointing to. It's all one. The images on the screen, it's all one. You are
screen.
The screen. You are the images on it. It's all one.
And so sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, not at all. Okay.
So if use my own words. I'm a projection of that screen. So I'm a projection. I'm projecting. I mean, okay, my life is panning out so that and I'm just looking at it, and I'm looking at things happen. Oh, this is so difficult. Okay. I think I have to.
Remember I said it was a felt experience. And so I was looking at you because you're big on my computer now. And there was a moment in there where you saw it and you felt it, right?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
But then what we all do, and we all know this, is that we start to want to hold on to that. We want to make sense of that, and we lose it again. And we're back in separateness. And that's okay. What just happens to everybody. That's fine. That's fine. Just get on with it. It's fine. But you saw it in that brief second. And that's why, again, these communities and this work, in my mind, is so important, because what we do is we keep supporting each other and pointing each other. But once you have that felt experience of pure relief, and I saw it in you, I could see it. It was like, whew. And then you know it's there. That's the felt experience I was talking about in the beginning. And you have to have that to know it's true. You have to feel that to know that there's something different than what life, it's not quite what it appears. And then you get all to this. Is it a projection? Am I on the screen? It's, again, even that is playing out in consciousness as it will. The fact that we forget.
I did feel it even for a brief moment. Thank you, Garret.
I felt it with you. So let's just stick with that, and then see where that takes us, and we'll come back to it. And it's cool. It's cool because then we get personal with it, and then we kind of lose it. Like, how does this work for me? And then we all do it. So, Diane, I said this to a group the other day, and I'm looking at Sarah. She was on the call. I said, just give it's okay to give your mind to what comes and goes. You can give your mind to what comes and goes, to what changes and appears and disappears. But your heart, give that to what never changes. Give that to what can never leave you. Give that to the permanent. And things start to make more sense. So again, it's okay if our minds, personal minds, get into what comes and goes, get into life, get into all the stuff. That's fine, and that's necessary, actually. But our hearts, give those to what can never ever leave us. Our hearts, and that's what we want to do in our work. We want to remind people to give your heart to what never ever can leave you. So after everything that comes and goes has come and gone, what's left? Give your heart to that.
I want to say one last thing. It's my heart's really. I love you, Garret. That's what I feel right now.
Love you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. We're going to go to Fiona next. I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, Garret. I'm looking for you on my screen, and I can't see you. I'd like
on my screen
to look at you.
Lucky me. Okay.
Okay, there you are. Got you. So I came on this call with the understanding of what you're saying. So I had different questions because when I read the 3 principles, I just really understood them to be a practical, very straightforward way of explaining non-duality.
Okay.
So the analogy you just gave of we are the screen, which is the form, and we are the screen, which is the formulas, and we are what's playing out on the screen, which is the form. I totally get that. And what I think I heard you say right at the beginning of the call was that, the only thing that pulls us away from knowing the oneness, from being the oneness, is the perceptual game we're playing in our heads with our thoughts. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
I don't remember, but I wouldn't, and I don't know that, I don't think that that's wrong, but I wouldn't say it like that. I would say it if it's okay. If it's okay, I tell you how I would say it. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay, I did say it. Now that I'm thinking, I would say that thought is the. I think I said something like thought veils the one being we are, creating the appearance of separation. So, but I wouldn't go as far as saying it's all the things that we're doing in our heads.
Okay.
It's simply thought, and that's a very and it's hard to. This is a concession, because again, when you talk about where we come from, who we are, we're really grasping at straws, because the human mind cannot access what comes before it. So we can talk about what comes after it. We can even talk about principles that we call something a principle, and we can talk about that. But we can't really talk about and investigate and access what comes before the human mind. The intellect is form.
Sure.
But that's why we say that the best teacher is always silence. But the separate self doesn't know from silence, so we talk about it. And in our talking about it, we try to point each other back to where we came from. And this is why it gets stupid simple, because and in my mind, we're regressing in this call. We're not evolving. This work's not evolving, it's regressing. It's going back. It's attempting to go back, if we could. Okay? So just with that said, I'll do my best to put words to it. Okay? The only way that consciousness, awareness, again, the religious word being God, could know the world of form is through us.
Yeah.
And it uses thought as the way to create us, the images, the refractions, the reflections, however you want to say it, of us. So God, consciousness, has to forget who it truly is in order to know itself in the world. Now, it doesn't need to do that to know itself. Awareness, consciousness, God doesn't need to do anything to know itself, its own being. Of course not. But in order to know itself in the world, it needs to separate. It needs us. It needs thought to separate it, to the illusion of separation. And here we are having a discussion pointing back to where we came from. That's why we say any two people having a discussion is consciousness interacting with consciousness in an attempt to get back to consciousness.
Sure. But so what might be helpful is I've moved to Portugal because I'm part of a conscious evolutionary community project here. And, I've studied non-duality for 20 years of my life. And it's been a main focus for the last 12. And then I came across the Free Principles last year. And I just thought, wow, this is just such I don't see what you're saying any different from the Free Principles, any different from Sydney Banks' teaching.
Well, that's perfect. I mean,
the only thing that got me questioning that was something you said about. So maybe I don't understand the Free Principles the way you're saying everyone else does. Maybe I understand Free Principles the way that you do. I don't know. But the thing that confused me is when, for me, I'm an emotional expert. I'm a psychologist, and yet I was still getting lost in my own emotions. So I was thinking, well, God, I've had all this teaching, I know all this stuff. I have this belief that we're not separate, And yet I can act an idiot and go into my emotions and become separate. Why do I do that? You know, why do I keep doing that? Or why do I do it sometimes? And then the 3 principles made me think, hold on, just slow down. And when I have those intense emotions, is there a thought that created that? And I'm not digging, I'm not using any psychology techniques. I meditate, so I'd sit and I'd meditate. And then I was like, wow, yeah, actually, there is a thought that created that physiological reaction that I then believed in with my thought and got lost in. And understanding that has been the quickest way for me to just drop it. Now, when I feel that physiological reaction in my body, I'm just like, oh, it's just a reaction. That's just a thought.
Fiona,
And it enables me to drop into oneness much quicker than anything else.
and Fiona, that, and this is just a suggestion as a teacher. If that's how it looks to you, and looks how that's your personal experience, that's all fine. I think where it could get a little sticky in my mind is if you were to suggest that to others, what you just said, as a method or something. I don't know what else it could be, because it sounded like a method to me. Maybe that's what it sounded like for sure. But I think where it would get sticky is if you suggested that to someone else. That's just how I.
Can I just quickly ask why? Because I have been, and it's been working, but I've not been using it as a strategy. I've just been asking people to watch.
Right. If someone doesn't know that who they are, they're again, in my experience, asking them to watch would be quite ineffective. The only thing that is allowing you to fall out of who you are, forget, so to speak, who you are, and then remember who you are, is consciousness.
Yeah.
Consciousness is allowing that to happen.
Yeah.
Consciousness allows that to happen, it happens. If consciousness doesn't, it doesn't. If consciousness allows you to momentarily forget who you truly are and get caught up in life, as we all do, I agree with that for sure, then that's what consciousness is allowed. If consciousness doesn't, it doesn't. And if you when you wake up, same thing. So any time we give credit to anything other than where credit is due, we're adding personal burden to someone else, and we're putting the onus on something that doesn't even in truth exist. It is magnifying the personal. And again, if it seems to play out that way for you, then it's perfectly fine. But when we start suggesting that to others is where it gets sticky, in my experience.
Okay, I have a lot more to say and to share, but I also don't want to take up everyone else's time.
Reach out to me anytime. Just send me a
That'd
note,
be cool.
message, whatever, however you want to do it. I'm interested in everything you said. I thought there was some, I think, but I actually think that the thing that you said about 3 principles, or whatever you want to call it, innate health, whatever, inside out, I think and basically what, as you said, Sid originally saw, if that's what he saw or whatever, I agree with you. I think it's all in line. Most of my students will say to me, like, I don't even know this is exactly in line.
Yeah.
I do think, I will go back to one thing though, Fiona. I do think though, any notion that we're a separate entity that has powers or consciousness or free will, I think all of this stuff, we're looking at the concessions that Sid was making for the time, and as opposed to looking at the foundation of his work, we're looking at the methodology, and we're trying to stay true to the methodology rather than the foundation. And I think that's where it's getting a little murky. Again, that's just how I see it. I don't want anyone to believe what I'm saying. That's just how I see it. Okay.
Thank you for your time, and I will reach out to you.
I look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And let's get to Pramila, please.
Hey.
Hi, Garret. Hi, Amir. Thank you for adding me on here. When I came on, you said something about that you've even written about it, but you don't know how anybody can say that, or it bothers you, that anything outside can cause your feelings. Can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Tell me what you're talking about. Like, what bothers me? I'm not.
That how can you point to someone saying that anything out, any circumstance outside is causing, is not causing your feelings? Any circumstance outside is not causing your feelings.
Well, I think what I was saying was that I think that it's important to remind people that nothing outside can exist separate from them. I think that's a more fundamental, more primary experience. So our primary experience is not of objects, not of circumstances, not of people, not of separateness, not of race, creed, religion, not of nationality. Our primary experience is one of pure awareness. So it's not of the objects. It's not of all these things. No baby knows any of that stuff. It knows that it's aware. It knows pure awareness. So to me, it's a mistake, to put it bluntly, to point to objects as things that are bona fide actual things that cannot affect us. That's simply not true. And no physicist, no scientist can find matter. They can't even find the thing. They look and look, you know, the astronomers and the scientists look for the universe. They can't find it because it doesn't exist outside of experience. You can't find this bottle separate from yourself, because outside of yourself, it's not here. And this is proven. This is proven. So why are we pointing to these circumstances and these objects as if they're real, telling people that they can't hurt us? Well, of course they can't hurt us, but they don't exist separate from us, not because they're real entities, not because the world is real. The world is not real. The world only exists in perception. That's so important to tell people. Ultimately, they'll come back and question how, if that's a real thing, is it not, you're saying that can't hurt me, but intuitively, they know it's not even a real thing. Again, our primary experience from the moment we're born is not being aware of things, it's being aware of the fact that we're aware. Point to that. So suggest to people, rather than focus on this and that, look out and see. Just look out and see. Sid would say, if everyone would stop fighting their experience, the world would change in a moment. What he was saying is, look out and experience. Don't fight, don't separate, don't look at distinction. Look out and be aware of being aware. Merely love, rest in love. That's what he was saying. From the perspective of one being, we don't even see objects. We see love. We don't see. It's so obvious. Just look at a small child. Do they see race or color or distinction? No, of course not. They don't even see it. They can't see it. They can't see that two people are, one's a man, one's a woman, one's dark, one's light. They don't even notice. They see love. And then we program them to see distinction. The child sitting in class, Pramila, and he or she is looking out the window in second grade, and pure love and wonder and imagination, and the teacher says, no, Pramila, look at the board, look over here, focus, focus, focus. And if that's not bad enough, they give the child who's not focused medication.
Yeah.
It's backwards. It's backwards. What if there's a chance that the material world isn't what we say it is? It's just a figment of consciousness. We're panicked over climate, over lack, over running out of things. Consciousness is unlimited. We can't run out. the material paradigm, under the materialistic paradigm, we will not survive. It's a law. We're addressing something that doesn't exist. And I so want this community to not point to those things as real things, because they're simply not. We're adding to that confusion. We're adding to the materialistic paradigm. It's true that nothing outside of you can hurt you, but let's get to the foundation of it. It's because nothing outside of us exists. We're missing the fundamental part. Sorry to go on so much, Carmela, but
that was perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Eric, because we're almost down to the wire, so I wanted to get one more question in, if that's okay, Garret.
Amir, I got time if you want. I'm like literally,
Okay.
I'm everything till 5 o'clock my time, and I know we're not there.
Okay, perfect. Let me, Eric, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
perfect.
Yeah.
It is no time anyway, right?
That's right.
No, Garret, I just wanted to say I thought it was wonderful. When I saw some of the, like what you wrote, that some other coach was responding to, I go, did this guy read my posts or my blog or something? It's like we arrived at the same place and saying the same thing, but I'm sure very different, through very different routes. I was involved with Three Principles as a student, and for 20 years or so, and applying it, quote unquote, in my life, and it felt like it was kind of chipping away at my false self, however you want to put it. I don't like the word ego, but it felt like I never was totally getting it. And someone told me about how they met Rupert Spira at a SAND conference, Science and Non-Duality. And I looked at his videos and I found out his teacher was Francis Lucille up in Temecula. So I started going to his meditation and dialogues, and it really resonated, even though I had no background in that. Anyway, long story short, after 2 or 3 years kind of soaking in that, came back to the Three Principles, and it's like, oh, this is what it's about. And it's kind of like illuminated the whole thing. So anyway, it's just really cool to see someone talking the same way I am, and it's like trying to find language, for it. And the other thing I wanted to say was, someone had a question about I think it was Diane, do I exist? And one of the insights I had recently was that it's not really the best interpretation to say that we don't exist, because our phenomenal experience has to be consciousness. I mean, it borrows, to use Rupert's language, it borrows its existence from consciousness. But so it does exist. It's just what actually exists really never stops existing. So things that we experience come and go. This is what we call time. What's permanent? That's what we are, even though it's not personal.
And that's cool. And I don't want to bore anybody, but whatever. But I don't even know much about the teachings of, like people say stuff to me like you just said about non-duality, and Buddhism or stuff like that. Is that what because it's almost like I investigate things after people tell me what I'm saying sounds like something. It's weird. And it's been great learning for me. I love to read, and I love, Rupert Spira is a great teacher to me. So was Francis Lucille. But Sid to me, still by a long shot outshines. And that doesn't mean him better than anybody else. But I'm not saying that. It's just still where many years ago, George and Keith pointed me, and it's so near and dear to my heart, and Richard Carlson too. It's still so dear to my heart that I don't know if that's ever going to change. Your point about experience, though, I think, and about what's real, I think is really right on. It's a mistake to ever tell anyone, in my mind, that what they're feeling, what they're experiencing is not real, because it is real. What we want people to question is the content. Can the content exist outside of experience? Can the content exist outside of consciousness? That's what we want people to start to, we want to chip away at that. But never ever do we want to discount someone's experience. That is the opposite of support. That is the opposite of compassion.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we write about this stuff and we seem to take a hard line, and a lot of non-duality teachers have expressed this, it comes across that that's what is being done. And that's why these kind of calls are important, because you start to get a feel for the teacher and you realize that's really not what's being done. But in the written form, sometimes or all the time, you want to be very crystal clear about who we are. And you can't give any wiggle room to the appearance of separation, appearance that we aren't in essence one being. And again, we say that's one too many, but there's no other way to describe it. So we don't ever want to placate the appearance that we're separate. That's a mistake. That if we start from that point, we're doomed. We're doomed. We have to start with the fundamental primary experience of every one of us that we are not separate. We are not. So I can't express it enough. It has to be that. Without that, it's a shot in the dark.
Yeah, it's like a change in the coin of the realm. It's like where you start from.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, in their quest to help, in our quest to help, so I've done it too, we attribute this separate self as an actual entity that has power, that has wisdom within. We misunderstand what that means. That is conscious, that has levels, all these things that absolutely rev up the activity of the separate self, so to speak. And it yearns for that. That's exactly what it wants us to do. Right. We're playing its game. As I said before, the notion of separateness, the separate self, is an activity. It has to do something to survive, and we're playing its game. We're giving it more doing. And this is what I talked to Amir about earlier, about the direct path. We are ready for it. We are not ready for we are this, we are that, practice this, practice that, you have powers, you have this. We're ready, we're craving it. Direct, who are we? Who are we? Go right to that. And the rest is so simple, it's not even funny. And that's kind of what you said about your own journey.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, that was wonderful, thanks, is regards to teachers. I love the heart that Sid has. You know, he hits you at a feeling level, and almost every time you come back to it, I mean, many times you'll come back and you go, and you get kind of like a different. He's painting with such a broad brush. It's like you get a different sort of take on it. He
had a million qualities as a human being, but it way back when I was young, and Keith and George gave me these tapes to watch, these videos to watch, and it pissed me off, but didn't. But that's what I thought was happening, because he was so authentic. He was so genuine. I was like, this guy cannot be for real. Like and to me, that is so the epitome of understanding, just pure realness, pure authenticity without reservation, just being yourself, your true self. And that's what Sid was. And it's so obvious. It's so obvious.
No pretentious, true humility.
Open, raw, absolutely, exactly.
Openness, yeah. I wanted to add that one of the insights I had that hit me too is that there really, and this kind of sounds out there, but there really is only one teacher. You know, we see them in many different forms. A teacher can even be a friend. It's like hits you with something, you know.
That's what I said earlier. There's really one thing we're pointing to, one thing we wake up to, who we are.
Yeah, and there's some like lenses or reflectors that you come back to that are really powerful.
Yeah, man. Let's continue the discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you.
We have one last question if you're down.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Sorry, we've got a bit of a dodgy internet connection here. So, my question, very, I kind of find that what you were saying around.
Jonathan, I would recommend you turn off your video because you're going in and out.
Also, Mir, I saw that Sarah said we had a few more questions. I'm happy if anyone wants to ask me questions. I'm happy to. Unless you got a bolt, I'm okay to stay.
I'm okay. I'm loving this, man. So for me, it's on your time. So I can do this as long as you need.
This is the most important thing we could be doing. It's not even.
Yeah. If we can get if Johnny can turn off his screen and try again, we can do it again. But if we have
I'd go on to somebody else because I can't even turn his camera off myself.
Yeah, go ahead, sir. For now, Jonathan can reach out to me or something.
do you have anybody else that has a question? Any thought? We got one right here. Okay. Elaine says it's probably the AirPods. So if you get off the AirPods and just call in, we'll get to your question. So. Okay, we got Wendy that wants to. Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I don't have the phone. It makes it difficult. Hi, Garret. A couple of things. One thing, when Amir mentioned way up at the top about, what if I have a problem with my wife? And what I really heard deeply this time for the first time is it's not about some sort of, let me see how I can unwind this problem with my wife or this issue that we're having. But rather sit back and remember, and I wrote these down, we are love, we are God, we are one being, and you also said we are forgiveness. So that if I am somebody who is aware, and I would like to think that I am, and I have a problem with, in my case, with my husband, and I say to myself, I'm catching myself getting caught up in pointing my finger at him or me, saying, gee, we're in a mix-up here. But if I sit back, and Amir will like this, if I cha-chung and I say, wait a minute, I am love, I am God, I am one being, and I am forgiveness, then I imagine that a lot of that seeming personal thought rendered meaning making will just float downstream.
Well, it's lovely what you're saying, but let me just throw one caution in there, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
And I saw it and how you expressed it, like, don't worry about what you wrote down, because you felt it. You know who you are. So if we continue to look to what we wrote down, to our notes, you may get 24 minutes or hours of relief and a nice feeling with your husband or something, but it won't last. So let's just forget about your husband a second, and let's talk about who we are and who he is. You, me, him, everyone. who you are is forgiveness. Who you are is resilience, understanding, compassion. You don't have any of those things. You are those things.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when we forget that, another way of saying forgetting would be when we connect our well-being to something that by nature is transient,
Mm-hmm.
including a relationship with our spouses, even a relationship with our children.
Mm-hmm.
If we connect our well-being, our security to something that by nature is insecure,
Mm-hmm.
we will automatically suffer. Automatically suffer.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a blessing. It actually means that everything is working exactly as it's meant to be when you feel that. It means that we're playing out exactly how it's meant to play out. We suffer when we look to the world, the physical world, as if it's an actual thing, as if it's permanent,
Mm-hmm.
as if it's meaningful. And we connect our well-being to that.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of insecurity, of suffering, is taking us back to who we are. So we might ask a separate self if we could do such a thing. Hey, on whose behalf is this thought arising? On whose behalf is this experience taking place? It's always on behalf, even though Eric doesn't like the word, of the ego. It's always on behalf of a non-existent separate self. And the minute we stare it in the face, it withers. It's when we feed it and we try to fix it and we look at notes and try to remember them that we rev it up even more. Again, the separate self is an activity, not an entity. The ego is not a thing. That's why Eric doesn't like the word, because it's not a thing. It's an activity. Now, it's a necessary activity of consciousness. Remember, we said it's how consciousness finds itself in the world. It's how consciousness, how God relates to the physical world, the objective world. It's necessary, but when it gets out of control and we start attaching who we are to that process, we lose it. And it's fine. But it's, yeah, we forget who we are, and that's okay. And as I was telling Catherine earlier, we all do it, and we all make mistakes, and we all trip up. And that's why support and understanding and being who we truly are, forgiveness, is so important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just one other thing you also mentioned about a little baby or a young, they don't distinguish man, woman, dark, light. They just say there's love. I'm in love. I'm part of love. Everything's love. And this was many, many years before I was ever introduced to the principle. Somebody said a new mom who just had a brand new baby and had a 3-year-old at home walked by the baby's room, and the 3-year-old was in the baby's room up against the bars of the crib, whispering to the baby, and the mother was able to hear, "Remind me again what God's like. I'm starting to forget."
Oh my gosh.
It was just so moving to me, and it just reminded me that we all really do know. And even in the movie 2001 Space Odyssey or something, there was an old man who was saying, finally at the end of his 80 years on the planet, said, now I'm back to being an infant again, because it's like a bell curve. When we're up at the top, 20s and 50s, making it happen, making money, paying the mortgage, we can be so
and all
out
we're,
of it.
and as I said a couple weeks ago, or whenever I wrote something, that there's no one on the brink of death that is regretting that they didn't have enough money or objects or possessions. It just, if anything, they're looking to love. They're back in love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The clues are everywhere. The clues are everywhere. As Sid would say, you just have to know what to look for. The clues are everywhere. And the clues are pointing us away from the cultural phenomenon, cultural misunderstanding that's been accepted as a truth, that objects are real, that objects are matter is an actual thing, that matter can exist outside of experience, outside of the senses. It's going to take a bold, it's a bold leap to get out there and say what some of us are saying. And it's all playing out in consciousness. We're not controlling the fact that we're doing that. We don't get the credit, and people who don't see it don't get the blame. It's playing out as it plays out. And this is why I say we don't want to say, okay, well, we can use this understanding to save the world. That would be so arrogant and presumptuous. It's not even funny. It's not us.
Right.
It's not us. And I don't mean arrogant in the wrong type of way. It's not the person who's doing it's not that way. That's how it looks to them, and that's playing out as it's supposed to play out also, if that makes any sense. So it's not like I don't mean it in a personal way. I'm just describing it. It's
Ludicrous.
It's playing out if it doesn't. We don't get the credit for seeing or not seeing, and someone doesn't credit for not seeing, and we don't even know that we're seeing. We're just in the hands of consciousness, playing our role.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Garret, we have two more. Jonathan wants to get back on, and then Kate, and then we're going to sit back and reflect after the call, if that's okay. So, Jonathan.
Thank you. I had a bit of a meltdown with my broadband. I realised that both my teenage daughters were streaming Netflix. The whole house was streaming. So I've gone on my 4G. But so thanks for having me back. Yeah, my question was really around. I've kind of been hanging around the principles for 4 or 5 years, and I find it interesting how sometimes I find parts of, I kind of feel, oh God, yeah, it's all about the consciousness, and then in 6 months' time it could be, oh no, it's all about thought, or it's all, I find different bits interesting and new learning all the time. One of the things I have realised is, and it's nothing new, I'm incredibly sensitive to people, be it in work life, in personal life. Someone can say something, and still, to this day, a guy says something to me, and I walk away and I get that feeling of anger, hurt, pain. I'm kind of like, oh, for God's sake, 5 years on. And I almost get confused. It's like, oh, do I leave this alone? I get almost, I feel locked up with it. I'm very uncomfortable with, but it's almost, there's a temptation to go in there and to try and fix, or to try and stop that pain or that hurting. And I just wanted to, ask you about that, because I'd like it to stop.
Well, I'm afraid, buddy, it's worse than that. So just stay with me here, and then it'll get better, I think, maybe. One of the reasons I bet that the principles or whatever, this work appeals to you in your mind, is because it just seems logical to you to want to share with others. In other words, if you stumbled onto some reasonable explanation that the world seems to be searching for, and it lines up with your experience, as I was speaking about earlier, then obviously the natural impulse will be to share, which is what I'm sure that is one of the one of the effects of last 5 years. I'm
Completely.
Okay. Well, by the same token, based on the vulnerability of seeing, the vulnerability of waking up to who you truly are, you can pretty much count on, when others don't see it, of that injuring you. That's also an effect of waking up to who you truly are. It's a natural effect. Sure, you are resilience in action, but you drop out of that. But you're dropping into a human being that's more open, more understanding, more forgiving, but again, more vulnerable. So from that perspective, you will hurt. That's why we say seeing more. When the bar gets raised, our feelings are more raw. We're more emotional. We're not less. It's the opposite of what you think. So just rest in knowing that it's coming from understanding. This is the journey that consciousness is taking you on. And you're lucky. It's awesome. Just go with it. It's a sign of understanding, not misunderstanding. You got it flipped. Because you've been told that nothing out there can affect you. But that's true, but not from the perspective of the human being you fall back into. But the human being's natural state is open, is vulnerable, is emotion, is sensitivity. And you're going right back to that. It's perfect now. Just understand, just from that perspective, you can see what that other separate self is going through, the pain he or she is in, the separateness, the aloneness, the isolation that they're feeling. And now you can help. If you didn't feel that, you would have no power to. It's beautiful. Just keep looking, keep going. You're right there.
Brilliant.
All right, man. Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty brilliant, man. Thank you, both of you guys, and thank you for the question. Our final question to Kate, if you can, I'll unmute you. Kate, you're on.
Hello.
Hey, Kate.
Hi. I'm not quite sure what my question is, but it's been like the last few months I've been getting what to me seem like huge insights into who I really am. And sometimes that's been like separating from who I thought I was. Sometimes it's been more like like no separation between me and everything. And then so these have been like huge kind of earthquakes, and then a week later I wake up just really angry with the whole thing. Like really like angry with the whole understanding, or wanting to reject who I really am. And it seems to be going in a bit of a cycle, and then I find out something, I get another insight about who I really am that feels, I'm almost glad that I rejected the first one in order that I could see it from a slightly different angle. And then I'm just really angry again, and it's slightly confusing because like the emotion of anger isn't something I feel very often. So I just wondered where
it's coming from.
Yeah, I suppose like sometimes it feels like it's almost like dying. Like sometimes seeing who I really am feels like suddenly being alive, and sometimes it feels like it's dying.
Okay, let's stay there. Let's stay there. Using the word separate self and true self, who we truly are, and then the feeling that you're describing of anger, which we'll address in a second. That feeling of pure love, pure pure, unlimited, infinite consciousness is almost never ever felt in the waking state. We experience it in between thoughts. Now, in other words, we go to sleep in between thoughts and then we wake up again. We go back home in between thoughts, back to who we truly are. Remember, thought veils who we truly are, creating the appearance of you and me, the personal. Thought falls away, we return to love, to God. Now, as Eric indicated before about time, because time is a concept of the separate self, we don't notice the true self in between thoughts. It seems to be instantaneous. But you have to understand that the true self lives in now, the here and now. The true self doesn't know space, doesn't know time. It only knows now, here and now. And we fall into the true self when thought falls away, when thought no longer veils, creating the personal. In the deepest, deepest of sleeps. How do we know we're onto something? Well, in deep sleep, no one has a nightmare. It's pure bliss. It's pure one. It's pure God. And then we return to who we truly are when we die. The ego, back to that word, the separate self, in all the other times, in my mind, it makes such sense that you would be getting angry because it is so kicking back against your realization. It so wants to drag you into time, into space, into the busyness of life. And that's what it's doing. And it's not going to be subtle. So when you wake up and you see, and as you see more, it's going to get more angry. It's going to be less subtle. It won't be subtle. But just like it was for Jonathan, this is how you know when the ego is kicking back and trying to drag you right back into time and space, into the real world, so to speak. It's the natural activity of the ego kicking back at you. And it's fine. It's fine once you understand what's happening. It's the understanding what's happening that will chill that ego right out, or not. But either way, you're still going to be okay. You're still going to be okay. That's why we say, look to understand, not to defeat that ego. If we try to placate it, if we try to use it and fix it's exactly what it wants us to do. That it wants the activity. It wants us to delve into the physical world. It wants it. It needs it. It craves it. It's how it stays alive. So understand what's happening and carry on. It's perfect. You're perfect. You're seeing. What could be more perfect? That's why these calls are so amazing, Kate. Like that's why we're going on past time, because what more would we want to do? Like, tell me what we would want to do more than share this understanding and kick this around with each other. I can't think of anything we want to do. What's greater than this? Name it. You can't. And again, that's why I've said 5 times in this call, these communities are so important, because we can support each other and we can guide each other when the ego kicks back. And that's why we're still on this call, an hour and however long it is, because there's nothing that trumps this. Nothing. So you're so on the right track. So on the right track. It's exactly what will happen. Just know that, understand that. And if you forget, give me a shout.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Garret, I think that was a perfect segue to thank you. One thing I will tell you about Garret, and I know many of you guys know, he is probably one of the most graceful or grateful people with his time. Like, I have not had a time where I had a question, I had resistance, I had whatever it is, he says, call me, let's get on a Zoom call. And he lives this, he breathes this, he loves people, he loves, you know, whether, look, I've had my disagreements with him. And can I share a quick story before we leave?
Oh no, you're gonna take the tenor of this whole call right into the gutter now, brother. No, I'm kidding.
No. I just want, this is really important. This is something that I think we'll end it on a good note. You know, Garrett's passionate, I'm passionate, right? We both have ways of looking at helping people and experiencing life and our ideas. One time we got on our call and we just were going at it. Where, you know, it was God having a human moment, and we were in our human moment, going back and forth. This was the most brilliant part of the dialogue. It wasn't so much what we were talking about, as he's saying, we were focusing on the wrong thing. After about 5 minutes of me shouting and him saying stuff back and forth, he goes, "Hey, Amir, I have a call in about 5 minutes. I'll talk to you later. I love you." And I said, "Oh yeah, okay, that sounds good. I love you too." As much as we get caught up in the form, in the ego, or whatever you want to call it, even in that moment I saw in the lack of tranquility, when we realized that's just an illusion, that's not where the magic is, we popped out of it. We didn't have to do anything about it. We popped out. We loved each other. We got off the phone, and I said, "Can't wait to talk to him again." And so, you know, with that being said, keep reading his stuff. Keep seeing where that resistance is. Keep reading other people's stuff and seeing what resonates with you, what doesn't. As you look in that direction, in my experience, you can't be too far off from your true self, as Garret mentioned. And thank you, Garret. I can't tell you from the bottom of my heart, all these people, I'm sure if we do this again, we'll have just as many people, if not more. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. If everyone can give them a big wave or a big kiss.
Thanks.
And
appreciate it.
Looking forward to more dialogues, bud. Really. You're that's all I got to say.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Look forward to hearing from you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Garret. Thanks, Amir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Garret.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Adios.
Thanks, Amir.
Love you.
Bye, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Love, love, love. Good times. Thanks very much.